July. The year is 1518. The city of Strasbourg is beginning another ordinary summer morning. Merchants are opening their shops. Children are running through the narrow streets. Church bells echo through the city. To everyone watching, it seems like just another day, until one woman steps into the street. Her name was Frau Troffea. Without music, without celebration, without any apparent reason, she begins to dance. At first, people simply stare. Maybe she's celebrating, maybe she's drunk, maybe she's lost her mind, but as the hours pass, she doesn't stop. Her movements become more frantic. Her feet pound against the stone streets. Sweat pours from her face. She's clearly exhausted, yet somehow she keeps dancing. Day turns into night. Night turns into another morning, and according to the historical accounts, she's still dancing. Soon, something even stranger happens. Another person joins her, then another, then another. Within days, what started as one woman dancing alone becomes dozens of people moving uncontrollably through the streets of Strasbourg. Weeks later, the number has grown into the hundreds. Some witnesses claimed people danced until they collapsed. Some reportedly suffered strokes. Others supposedly died from exhaustion. The city authorities panic. Doctors are called. Priests are consulted. No one can explain what is happening. And then the leaders of Strasbourg make a decision so unbelievable that it almost sounds fictional. Instead of stopping the dancing, they encourage it. They hire musicians. They build wooden stages. They tell the dancers to keep going. Some believed that if the afflicted simply danced long enough, whatever had seized them would finally leave. Instead, the outbreak only appears to grow. More than 500 years later, historians are still asking the same question the people of Strasbourg asked in 1518. What happened? Was it poisoning? Mass hysteria? Religious fear? Or has one of history's strangest events been misunderstood all along? This is the story of the dancing plague of 1518. To understand the dancing plague, we have to understand the city where it happened, because strange events rarely happen in a vacuum. In the summer of 1518, Strasbourg wasn't the peaceful medieval city we often imagine. It was a city under pressure. Strasbourg was part of the Holy Roman Empire, a bustling centre of trade with nearly 25,000 people living within its walls. Merchants, craftsmen, priests, labourers, and farmers all crowded together behind fortified gates. On the surface, life continued as normal, but beneath that surface, people were exhausted. For years, the region had been hit by poor harvests. Food shortages drove prices higher and left many families wondering where their next meal would come from. Famine wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a constant threat. Disease was never far away either. The Black Death had devastated Europe little more than a century earlier, and while the worst of the plague had passed, outbreaks of deadly illnesses were still common. Most people had watched neighbours, friends, or family members die long before their time. Life expectancy was short. Medicine was primitive, and every unexplained sickness brought new fear. But physical hardship wasn't the only burden these people carried. The early 1500s were a time of intense religious anxiety. Just 1 year before these events, Martin Luther had nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg, igniting what would become the Protestant Reformation. Although Strasbourg would eventually embrace many of Luther's ideas, in 1518 Europe was filled with uncertainty. Long-held religious beliefs were being questioned, and many people believed the world was entering dangerous spiritual territory. For the average citizen, God, angels, demons, miracles, and divine judgment weren't abstract theological ideas. They were part of everyday life. People believed that sin could bring disaster upon an entire community. They believed saints could both protect and punish. They believed unseen spiritual forces were constantly at work around them. One saint in particular was associated with a terrifying curse. His name was Saint Vitus. According to popular belief, those who offended Saint Vitus could be afflicted with an uncontrollable compulsion to dance. Whether that belief had any basis in reality didn't matter. What mattered was that thousands of people believed it. Fear has a remarkable ability to shape how people think. Sometimes it can even shape how people act. By the summer of 1518, Strasbourg was a city worn down by hunger, disease, uncertainty, and deep religious fear. The people didn't know it yet, but history was about to hand them one of the strangest mysteries the world has ever seen, and it would all begin with one woman stepping into the street. Against this backdrop of fear and uncertainty, the impossible began. According to the city records, it all started sometime in July of 1518. A woman named Frau Troffea stepped into the streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. No festival had been announced, no musicians were playing, there was no celebration taking place. She simply started dancing. At first, those around her probably assumed it was a strange outburst that would soon pass, but it didn't. Hour after hour she continued moving. As the day wore on, her dancing became less joyful and more desperate. Witnesses described her as exhausted, yet unable to stop. By the following day she was reportedly still dancing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't voluntary. Then something even stranger occurred. Within a week, several more people had begun dancing as well. Then several became dozens. Soon, according to contemporary reports, there were around 30 people dancing uncontrollably through the city. The authorities had never seen anything like it. Naturally, they sought answers. The city consulted physicians, hoping medicine could explain the phenomenon. Surprisingly, the doctors concluded that the dancers were not possessed by demons, nor were they suffering from a contagious disease. Instead, they believed the dancers had what they described as hot blood, a common medical explanation at the time for certain unusual behaviors, and from that diagnosis came one of the most astonishing decisions in the entire story. The city officials concluded that the dancers shouldn't be restrained. They should be allowed, even encouraged, to dance. Their reasoning was simple. If dancing had caused the illness, then perhaps dancing continuously would allow it to run its course. So instead of stopping the outbreak, they accommodated it. The city hired musicians. Professional drummers and pipers were brought in to provide a steady rhythm. Wooden stages were constructed in public squares. The afflicted were gathered together so they could continue dancing. To the people of Strasbourg, this wasn't entertainment, it was treatment. Looking back, it sounds unbelievable. But with the medical knowledge available in 1518, city leaders believed they were helping. Instead, the situation appeared to grow worse. More people reportedly joined the dancing. Some accounts claim the number eventually reached hundreds, though historians debate the exact figure. The longer the outbreak continued, the more desperate the city became. Eventually, officials abandoned their original plan. If encouraging the dancing wasn't working, perhaps they had misunderstood the problem entirely. The dancers were no longer treated as medical patients. They were treated as people suffering from a spiritual affliction. Many were transported to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus. The saint, many believed, had the power, both to inflict and to remove this mysterious curse. There priests performed religious rituals, special shoes were placed on the dancers' feet, prayers were offered, whether because of the pilgrimage, the passage of time, or some other unknown reason. The outbreak gradually came to an end. The streets of Strasbourg grew quiet once again, but while the dancing had stopped, the questions had only just begun. What had these people actually experienced? And perhaps more importantly, could something like this really happen? Or have we misunderstood the story for over 500 years? By the end of the outbreak, the dancing had stopped. The streets of Strasbourg had finally grown quiet again. But the biggest question remained unanswered. What caused it? More than 5 centuries later, historians still don't agree. There are several leading theories. Each explains part of the mystery, but none explains all of it. Theory number 1, ergot poisoning. One of the oldest explanations points to a fungus called ergot. Ergot can grow on rye, a grain commonly used to make bread in medieval Europe. Under the right conditions, consuming contaminated grain can cause hallucinations, muscle spasms, convulsions, and other frightening symptoms. Some researchers suggested that the people of Strasbourg had unknowingly eaten poisoned bread. At first, it sounds convincing. A contaminated food supply could affect many people at once. It could also explain why the outbreak seemed to spread rapidly. But there's a problem. Ergot poisoning usually causes violent muscle contractions that make movement incredibly painful. Victims often lose coordination altogether. Dancing continuously for hours or even days would be almost impossible. And if an entire city's food supply had been contaminated, historians would expect to see many other symptoms recorded alongside the dancing. The historical accounts don't clearly describe that. Because of these issues, most modern historians believe ergot poisoning probably wasn't the primary cause. Theory number 2, mass psychogenic illness. Today, this is the explanation many historians find most convincing. Mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass sociogenic illness, occurs when extreme psychological stress begins producing real physical symptoms throughout a group of people. It's important to understand what this means. It isn't people pretending. It isn't acting. The symptoms are genuine. The human brain is incredibly powerful. Stress can make people faint. Fear can make people physically sick. Panic can spread through crowds in a matter of minutes. History is full of examples. Schools have been temporarily shut down after dozens of students suddenly developed unexplained symptoms. Entire communities have experienced illnesses that doctors later traced back not to bacteria or viruses, but to overwhelming psychological stress. Now, imagine Strasbourg, a city already struggling with hunger, disease, religious uncertainty, constant fear. If one person genuinely believed they had been cursed, could others have unconsciously begun experiencing the same thing? Many historians think the answer is yes. But even this theory leaves unanswered questions. Why dancing? Why not some other behavior? To answer that, we have to look at what the people of Strasbourg already believed. Theory number 3, the curse of Saint Vitus. In the 16th century, many people believed in what was known as Saint Vitus's dance. According to local tradition, Saint Vitus could punish those who displeased him by forcing them into uncontrollable movement. To us, that may sound like superstition, but to the people living in Strasbourg, it was reality. When people already believe a particular curse exists, that belief can shape how they interpret unexplained events. A single woman dancing in the street wasn't just strange. To many witnesses, it may have looked like proof that the curse was real, and if enough people believed the curse was spreading, fear itself could have become contagious. In that sense, belief wasn't merely part of the story, it may have been one of the driving forces behind it. But can we trust the story? There's one final question historians have to ask. Did everything actually happen the way we've been told? Most of what we know comes from city records, medical writings, and chronicles written years after the event. Some sources claim dozens died. Others never mention deaths at all. Some estimate there were hundreds of dancers. Others provide much smaller numbers. Like many events from the medieval world, the evidence is incomplete. That doesn't mean the dancing plague never happened. Most historians agree that some kind of dancing outbreak almost certainly occurred, but the exact number of participants, how long it lasted, and how many people died may never be known with certainty. Sometimes the greatest challenge in studying history isn't finding answers, it's determining which questions we can answer at all. So, what really happened in Strasbourg during the summer of 1518? The honest answer is, we don't know. Perhaps it was a community pushed to its psychological breaking point. Perhaps centuries of fear, famine, disease, and deeply rooted religious beliefs created the perfect conditions for something almost impossible to imagine. Or perhaps there's a piece of the puzzle that has simply been lost to history. That's both the frustration and the beauty of studying the past. History isn't a collection of perfectly preserved facts. It's a puzzle assembled from letters, diaries, government records, eyewitness accounts, and archaeological discoveries. Sometimes those pieces fit together perfectly, other times they're missing. The dancing plague reminds us that even events witnessed by hundreds of people can become mysteries over time. Memories fade, records disappear, stories grow with every retelling. And yet, despite all of our modern science and technology, no explanation has answered every question. Maybe that's why this story continues to fascinate us over 500 years later. Not because people danced, but because it forces us to confront something we're often uncomfortable admitting, that there are still moments in history we don't fully understand. Sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't hidden beneath ancient ruins or buried with forgotten kings. Sometimes they're found in ordinary streets, where ordinary people experienced something extraordinary, and perhaps that's the most unsettling part of all. Somewhere in Strasbourg, on an ordinary summer morning in 1518, one woman took a step, then another, and before anyone realized what was happening, history had become a mystery. Thank you for watching Historo. If you enjoy exploring the stories history still can't fully explain, consider subscribing. Because sometimes the truth isn't stranger than fiction, it's history